What are the most, like, sort of the three most important things that people with Parkinson's should take into consideration with their nutritional plan?
I know this is going to sound really like extra broad and extra silly, but one of the biggest things that comes to my mind is water. Water is essential to our bodies, but it's so important when you are taking medications. When your bowel movements are slowing down, you need that water to help keep things going. You need water to help you chew and swallow. You need water to hydrate you and keep you from getting dizzy or nauseous. And for that orthostatic hypotension, it's like that's going to help that as well. It's like water is so important. I can't stress it enough. And I heard a stat the other day. I can't remember it precisely, but it was very, very high. And it was disturbing of how many people are walking around dehydrated and what that causes. And it was very disturbing. And I can tell you, all of my patients, I'm talking about drinking water and helping them develop a plan for how to get to that goal to make sure that they're getting their water into the day. So that's a really, really big one. Number two, I would say fruits and vegetables. Fruits and vegetables are my passion. Of course, being a dietitian, I think that's kind of cliche, but it's true. I'm really passionate about helping people understand that vegetables don't have to be just like sitting and eating a bunch of broccoli. It doesn't have to be sitting and eating a big salad. I can tell you I hardly eat either of those. I love to have fun with spaghetti squash, or this weekend I had a retreat with my team and we did some kohlrabi cooked into a chorizo hash for breakfast. It was delicious. We do zoodles, with meatballs and marinara. So many fun things you can do. And so really teaching people how to incorporate those vegetables in a fun way so that they'll want to eat them. And vegetables and fruits are filled with antioxidants, which have been shown to have neuroprotective, what's the word I'm looking for?
Qualities.
Thank you. And they can really help bring down the inflammation, which is such a high issue for people with Parkinson's. So fruits and vegetables. And number three, this is probably a less popular opinion option, but for me, it's something I'm really passionate about. And I feel like there's a huge gap in this. And what's being talked about is protein. And, protein is essential. Like we have to consume protein in order to keep our muscles and joints and everything going. Every single cell in our body is made up of protein, and our body can only make a certain portion of that. And so we have to consume it. And so when you have people with Parkinson's being told not to eat protein at all, and that's not what they hear. That's what they hear. They hear the doctor say, you can't eat,
Right.
protein with this medication, or
Right.
when you're taking this medication, they hear that as like, I can't eat protein, when that's not necessarily the facts. Like we
Right.
need to look at making a schedule so that we can fit that protein into the day. And so that's really where become a passion of mine, is helping people with Parkinson's understand that they need protein, but it just takes a little extra planning and how to get that into your day and work around your meds.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's, it's reasonable that a lot of times they're like, well, that just means none, because the amount of planning I have to do in my day anyway, like I'm planning when I can exercise, when I feel good, when I can work, when I'm going to take my meds, when I'm going to do all of these things. And then you say like, well, if you're going to have protein, you better make it, it's got to be this time and this time. And then they're just like, you know what, forget it. I'm not even going to eat it. And this will help me. And so today I hope we can come up with some really great strategies for them to get it and to, get all the building blocks that they need to do well with Parkinson's.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm a huge fan of the water. Every day, take a full glass with every time you take a medication. It's going to actually make your medicine work, aside from all the other downstream impacts that you just talked about, for sure. Great. So we're going to talk about, now we're going to go sort of deep into the questions that people have asked us.
Yeah.
And they're specific, but I think that's great. People have specific questions, and I've culled through hundreds of questions and came up with the ones that sort of show up the most.
Yeah.
And we'll just kind of run through those.
Sounds good.
So the initial two are, I might get one side or the other. Someone's either saying, I keep losing weight, I don't want to lose the weight, what's happening, what can I do about it? And then
Mhm.
the other, on the flip side of that, is like, no matter what I do, I keep gaining weight. What can I do about that? So start first with losing weight. Let's talk about all the different reasons why someone with Parkinson's might be losing weight, and then what they can do.
Yeah, when somebody is losing weight rapidly and, not understanding why that's happening, I really think it's important that we take a step back and we look at, okay, what has changed, or what is happening, in my day, what's happening to my body that could be potentially relating to this. And especially with Parkinson's, there's a lot of different symptoms from the medications and from the disease that can cause you to lose weight, which is number one, just loss of appetite, not really wanting to eating, which can also come from, the mental and emotional side of the disease, which can come from depression. That's so common for people to not want to eat because of depression. Constipation. If you're not going to the bathroom regularly, I tell this to my clients all the time, they might not lose weight because they're constipated, but also you might lose weight because you're not eating enough because you're constipated. So it can kind of go both ways with that. Trouble chewing and swallowing. So if you're having these issues, it's really important to recognize and say, okay, you know what, like I'm having some issues. Maybe I should seek out some help because that's preventing me from eating a lot of the foods I'm used to eating. And that could be a big reason why they're losing weight. Nausea, whether it's from the medications, or just not eating regularly, could be a combination of both. I think it's important to sit down and look at that. Like what am I doing throughout the day? I know a lot of my clients maybe skip meals or don't eat until later in the day. And I'm like, well, obviously you're not going to feel great if you're not fueling your body earlier in the day. But on top of that, especially with medication, it's so important to make sure that you're eating a little something with that. We'll talk about that later as to what that might look like. But access to food is also really important, especially when we're talking about Parkinson's and what they're able to do on their own. And maybe they need a caregiver to help, or maybe they can't get to the grocery store on their own, or they're scared to go to the grocery store. There's so many things that, elements that go with that. But that could be a big part of it too, is just not having access to food. So then they're not eating because they don't have the food available.
Right. So a couple of things that you touched on. So the water, in terms of, if you don't take water with your meds, some people get nauseous, right?
Yep.
And so that's the other reason to say, there's a million reasons why to drink water. So definitely do that. The other thing is, some people that have dyskinesia, are like, wow, nothing's changed. But the reality is, if your body is moving 24/7 in that way, you're burning calories. Like your body is
Absolutely
moving. And so if that is something that you experience, that's definitely something to look at. And we'll talk about this with the other one, but I think it's important to say, like, let's say you've taken all of these things into account. And you're like, yeah, no, still, I feel like I'm doing the thing, I'm still doing it. Go see your doctor. Like, this could be, it could be unrelated to Parkinson's, right? You could be losing weight for another reason. And it's important to go get checked out. So definitely kind of do a checklist, see what you're doing. If nothing else has changed, make an appointment and see if there's something
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. And alongside of that, once you've talked with your doctor and your doctor confirms that like there isn't necessarily another underlying issue, I would go see a dietitian, because one of the things that we do is, here in our own office, we have a body composition analysis scale that actually tells us each person's basal metabolic rate. And so we're able to calculate very efficiently, very effectively, someone's exact amount of calories that they're burning. And so then we can help them track those calories and help them figure out, like, okay, this is where you're not getting enough food at all. Like you definitely need this many calories and you're eating this many. That's why you're losing weight, and so it really gets right to it, and so a lot of people just don't know that that's available, or that they can do that. And so I do recommend, seeking out a dietitian's help as well, once you've confirmed with the doctor that that's not
right. And just the keeping a food journal,
Yeah.
it's kind of a pain for some people, but if you just start taking it, you're like, oh, because you can like get constipated or feel nauseous and you feel full, so you feel like you've eaten maybe, but you actually didn't. And so writing every single thing down and then taking it to that dietitian, you can be like, oh, here's what I'm actually doing, and you can fill in that gap. What about people that are gaining weight?
People that are gaining weight, it actually has a lot of the same similarities to, believe it or not, but just slightly different. One thing to think about with weight gain is think about, again, what in my schedule has changed maybe since I've been diagnosed. Am I eating less in the morning because that's when I take my meds, then I'm maybe binging in the afternoon? Or, what does my food routine look like? I see that with so many clients where they don't even realize that they're just going way too long in between eating. And especially with Parkinson's and the medication routine, like that could be throwing off the food routine. And when you go too long without eating, then your blood sugars get too low and then you're just starving. And especially when you have a higher need for calories and then you just kind of overdo it, that's a very common issue for everybody, but especially then with Parkinson's. The medication can also just cause the binge eating and just eating behavior changes. So I think it's really important to take a good hard look at yourself. I know that's hard, but maybe even have a caregiver, who's around you a lot say, yeah, you've kind of been doing this differently, or you've been eating more, at your meals, or, snacking more. You haven't been as active, so you're not burning as many calories. So there are lots of little elements to it that I think just by doing some simple observations can really help you come to some conclusions as to what might be going on. But again, just like with weight loss, I think it's really important to make sure you are keeping your doctor in the loop about this and see what they say. And then if they recommend that you go see a dietitian, I would recommend that. And again, sometimes it's just about creating a new schedule for you, with your new medication routine.
Right. Okay, let's talk about constipation. Huge problem for people with Parkinson's.
Yeah.
What do you recommend? I mean, some of this, is like, I know that, when I'm talking to just somebody without Parkinson's, and we're talking about constipation, it's like, here, try this. And it's like, oh, those are all things that will work. But constipation with people with Parkinson's is like relentless, and it's a tough nut to crack. So what are some things that you've told your clients that's working?
So I would say like natural sources, like natural ways, without like turning to supplements or medication. I would say always start with water. Water, again, I mean, we're just going to keep repeating water throughout this entire webinar because it's just so important. But that's going to help with moving things through the gut and help you go. Dehydration obviously slows all of that down. And so it's really important to make sure you do that. The other thing that is kind of forgotten are electrolytes. So electrolytes are really important. And I talk about this with dehydration, and I talk about it in one of the other questions. But electrolytes are like the electricity for all of our cells. And if we are low in electrolytes, it can cause dizziness, it can cause nausea, but also it can slow down the gut because, we have these little sphincters in our gut that are little muscles. And think about when muscles are contracting, all of our muscles are contracting, but if they're not contracting, then what's happening? Well, it's stuck there and it's not moving. So electrolytes can be really, really important to help you with that. And magnesium in particular is really, really important for that. And you can take, natural sources of magnesium. They also have, very specific types of magnesium that are specific to, constipation or muscle contraction or restless legs and different things like that. So make sure that you're, getting the right type. That's a really important one. The other thing I would say is, again, back to fruits and vegetables, getting that fiber, but you can also get fiber through whole grains. You can get fiber through, cereals. You can get them through even yogurt, like some of the Greek yogurts that I recommend have added fiber, which is great. But you want to make sure you're getting a mixture of soluble and insoluble fiber. And that's a fact that a lot of people kind of forget. They're like, oh, it has fiber. Well, like an apple has a lot of fiber, but half of it is soluble and half of it's insoluble. And if you're not eating the skin, then you're not getting the insoluble. And so it's important to understand what does what. So soluble is going to bind you up, and insoluble is going to help move things through the gut. And so you want to make sure you're getting a mixture of that. Some labels, like for different foods that have fiber added to them, they will actually list it out and tell you which is which. So for example, oats, if you buy just old-fashioned oats, Quaker oats or whatever brand you buy, it'll say insoluble fiber on there. And so it's important to have a mixture of both, versus like insoluble might cause the opposite issue. It might cause more loose stools if you have too much of that. And soluble will help bind you up more and can cause more issues. So
Oh, that's good. That's good to know.
yeah.